Welcome to my library. Today, after corrupting you yesterday and introducing you to the Venerable Harmonica, I thought you may have an interest in it because I had several responses and phone calls about harmonicas. So I thought today I'd talk a little bit about the Venerable Harmonica and then throw in a little music knowledge at the same time. And hopefully, by the end of this one session here, you have a better understanding of music in general, and I'll give you the precepts that allow you to learn to play any instrument, not just a harmonica. But if you're interested, I'll continue this series not just on harmonica, but different instruments and music in general. And I've thought about doing this for a long time, and Facebook's as good a place as any to do that. So let's start out today talking about the history of the Venerable Harmonica. If you look at it, it just looks like a piece of metal with 10 holes in it. And basically this particular instrument right here has only 10 holes in it because it's a diatonic, what we call a diatonic harmonica. Oh my God, there's a big word right there, diatonic. It's not important you know what diatonic means. It's only important that you understand what it does. And that's true with a lot of things in life. You don't have to learn all the mathematics. I'll explain some of it to you, but you don't have to learn that. You have to get the concept. Once you understand the concept, you can apply it to playing any instrument. So let's take this. Where did the harmonica come from and when did it get here on the earth? Most of you would probably be like 99% of the whole population of the world and say, well, they're all harmonicas came out of Germany, you idiot, don't you know that? Doesn't happen to be true. It's not true at all, actually. The harmonica has been around very close to over 2,000 years. The first known harmonicas were made in China. Surprise! Truly, they were. Now, this harmonica was made in Germanic. In fact, this one was made in Germany. This one was too. This is a diatonic harmonica made by the company called Hohner in Germany. They make excellent harmonicas. But the originals had reeds made out of, what would you think, in bamboo, maybe? Yes, that was it. They made them out of bamboo in China about 2,000 years ago. And they had about the same number of holes and everything. They were more cumbersome, they were lower pitched, they were not as robust and perfectly in tune as they are today, and yet they were harmonicas. The Germanic peoples didn't start making and manufacturing harmonicas until the late 1700s. That's not all that long ago. So this is not a real old instrument. And the reeds that make the sound here are usually made out of brass today. Some of them are made out of steel, gives them a totally different sound. And real cheap harmonicas use reeds made out of plastic. If you have a little kid and you just want him to go hang, 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 sound like a ruptured duck, you buy him a plastic harmonica. Don't expect him to be a virtuoso and play like you hear on television. They're not really good instruments. In fact, they're not much of an instrument. They make noise. That's what they are. They're a good noise maker. And they're great for little kids. They like them. They can chew on them and do all kinds of things. But that's not what we're talking here today. We're talking real harmonicas. So, how did it get from China to Germany in that area? Well, before that even happened, our Western music was founded on work done by Greek mathematicians. Most of our Western instruments were based on the scales that were developed in Greece many, 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 many years ago. They had all kinds of written music, they had orchestras, they had all that kind of stuff. They had brass instruments, they had horns, they had violin, stuff like violins and things like that, different stringed instruments. They didn't have originally keyboards. Later on in Greece and all over the world, or the Western world, the keyboards that came out, which were like claviers or harpsichords and things like that. The difference between a piano or a clavier and a harpsichord, the harpsichord had little picks in it and it picked strings when you hit keys. It actually picked the strings. But a clavier was like a piano. That was when you pushed on a key, a little hammer went whack and hit a string, and that's the way pianos are still done today, except for keyboards, which are totally electronic, okay? Now there's a reason I like stringed instruments better than I do keyboards. I play keyboards, yes I do. But I still like my little baby grand because of the resonant frequencies that are generated by the strings themselves. Very hard to replicate in a keyboard. They do pretty good, but they're not the same. But anyway, let's go back to the harmonica, and let's go back to Greece. What is a scale in music? A scale on a fish, everybody understands. When I say a scale in music, people glaze over and say, oh my God, I don't want to learn scales. A scale simply means a measurement. A yardstick is a scale. A 1 foot long ruler is a scale. In music, the scale is the distance between tones in frequency. And there's a special thing, and it started out with strings and flutes and things, that people learned thousands of years ago. If you take a string and stretch it from point A to point B with a given tension, and you pick it and it makes a sound, and you can have a little machine that you can find out how many times it's vibrating, and you keep tightening it and tightening until your little machine here tells you 440, and that means it vibrates back and forth 440 times every second. You will have the foundation of all music today, both West and Eastern music. And that's the A tuning note of A that is used in orchestras and bands and things around the world now. Now that always hasn't been a 440A. Back at the time of Bach and stuff, it was around 432, 435, 437. It's changed over the years, primarily due to arguments on standards. But today, our music is played generally around a 440A. So what that means is the 0 point on the scale, the lowest, not the lowest, but the A, the starting point starting with a note A is 440. As you go higher and higher in frequency, faster and faster, the pitch goes higher and higher. So if I do this, it went from low to high. I went from low frequency to higher frequency. So why am I telling you all that? Why do you want to know about a scale? Well, the scales are very useful in music because all the melody lines and everything play around a scale or multiple scales for that matter. Harmonicas are no different. When you play a diatonic harmonica, don't worry about the word. We're not going to talk about that. But understand, you only have a limited number of notes here, and it's not every note that exists in the modern scale, which from one octave, and I'm going to explain that right now. The scale in music, in the original Greek scales, only had 8 different notes between the A and the next A, and they were A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then back to A. Doesn't go to Z. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and back to A. Now, I tuned this string to A. Now watch this. This is magic. If I take that string and it's playing it in A at 440, if I just touch right in the middle of that string, just touch it, dead center, and play over here or play over here, you'll get the same note on both sides, but it won't be a 440A. It will be 880 vibrations a second over here and 880 over here. Really? Okay? So what does that mean to you? Well, that means all the notes in the musical scale go from A to a string cut in half with the same tension. So it goes from a 440A up to a new A of 880. And the original music of all Western music was based on only 8 tones. That's it. Okay? So a lot of the music you hear, probably 80% of it, is based around some rudimentary scales that go back 1,000 or 2,000 years. No kidding. And it's amazing what you can do with just 13 tones. It's amazing. Now, where did they get those 13 tones? Well, the Greeks only had 8 originally, right? Between the A and the A, and they didn't have a Gutenberg press 2,000 years ago, but some people mingled with people from Asia. And the Asia had an A and an A, it wasn't called an A and A. They had those two notes, but between their strings cut in half, they only subdivided it into 6 steps, counting the A on both ends. And they weren't the same intervals that the Greeks had. You say, big deal. It is a big deal. Why is it a big deal? Because from the A to A, if you got 2 different scales, maybe it would be possible to put them together and add the 5 different ones here. The octaves are the same, the A and the A in both scales, but they only had 5 different tones in between. The Greeks only had 7, with the octave being the 8, with them 6, with the octave being the 7th. And they took those notes, the Greeks did, and put them into these places in between their scale, and it came out in frequencies a perfect logarithmic scale. It was like both civilizations had lost something. And when they put it together, it was like magic to them. They called their new scale, which had 13 tones counting the octaves, okay? And they called it a chromatic scale. Chromo means color, colorful scale in Greek. Isn't that entertaining? I think it is. I hope you're not bored yet. So now we got a new scale that the whole world uses now, called the chromatic scale. It no longer just has 8 tones or just 6 tones in between the octave, and the octave is only a string cut in half. So if you take your string and you play the whole thing and you got it tuned to 440, you touch the middle, play each side, it'll be 880 on each side. That is called an A because it sounds very similar to the whole string. But when you divide it exactly in half, it sounds kind of the same, and it's an octave higher. It's higher by a whole half a string higher in pitch. So you go, what? You say, oh, that's crazy. No, it's really cool because there's another thing called resonance. If I take a string here and tune it to a 440A, and I take another string over here, make it shorter, tune it a little tighter, and I make it an 880A, if I take this string over here and play it, the 440A, this one instantly, and I mean instantly, will automatically start vibrating at 880. It's called harmony. How about that? Anybody ever tell you about harmony? Harmony is all about resonant frequencies. When I play a guitar, for example, a lot of times I play a lot less strings than other people do in what we call alternative tuning. Why? Because the guitar will play the other strings as long as I don't put my fingers on them by itself, and I can make this big sound doing less work. I'll do anything to do less work. So I'm getting not far afield. I'm trying to get you enthused about you can understand music. Because of the way our parochial schools are set up and teaching kids music, really it's an expedition in getting people to cooperate and do things together. There's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of music, the simplicity of music, is lost in the way we try to teach it in our parochial school systems in the United States. Japan, not so bad. They use a Suzuki method, and they get kids to actually understand it by doing. That's the same thing in our engineering today. We don't do that. We take kids, put them behind a computer and say, this is the way you do it. And then when you try to manufacture it, they can't, and they wonder why it costs them a lot of money. It's all the same thing to me, one thing. So let's go back to harmonica so I can close this out. We now know, if I go on this, I go, hear all those sound a little alike? That's 2 octaves there. There's one in the middle. There's 3 A's on this harmonica. Now, don't worry, this isn't in the key of A. This is actually a key of G harmonica. So what you heard, if you have relative pitch in your head, is G, 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 with the pitch going higher. Let's do it again. So there's available 13 tones from here to here and another 13 tones higher from here to here. Got it? 13 tones from here to here. There's only 10 holes. How can we do that on a harmonica? It's really pretty simple. When you play on a harmonica, I showed you this a second ago, I think I did. If I blow in it, if I draw in it, same hole. That went backwards, didn't it? Well, this is why it's called diatonic. This, I said before, is in one key. This happens to be a G harmonica, key of G, major scale, which we'll learn later if you want me to continue the series. And this is a C harmonica. Listen to the difference. This is higher. G, A, B, C. Okay? G, A, B, C. Two different scales. They don't sound the same because they start at a different location. This one starts at a G, this one starts at a C. So if I played, what I played a little earlier, and somebody wanted to sing and they say, I'm a girl, I can't sing that low. I grab a C harp. I learned one thing, and I can play all different pitches just by switching the harmonicas. That's the advantage of the diatonic system that the Germans came up with. And yes, it's all about mathematics, but enjoying it doesn't require you to understand the mathematics, but it is advisable for you to understand the basic knowledge that created the mathematics. And then you can apply it easier and learn music easier than you can any other way. I hope you enjoyed this session. If you like this, let me know and I'll continue them. If you don't like them, I'll go back to photography for a while.